Céad míle fáilte. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Catherine King, and I'm the Vice President of Development at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. The Council is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower more people to engage in global affairs. I'd like to take a special thank you to our donors and members who make programs like this possible through their generosity. It's my honor to welcome you here today for our program with Minister Michael McGrath on the legacy of the Good Friday Agreement. Today's program is on the record and is being recorded. Any views expressed by speakers we host here at the Council are their own and do not reflect any institutional positions. I would like to thank Minister McGrath's staff for making this program possible, especially John Hogan, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Finance. I would also like to thank the staff at the Irish Consulate here in Chicago, particularly Consul General Kevin Byrne and Vice Consul Sarah Keating. Before we begin, I would like to introduce the Minister and our moderator. Michael McGrath is a Member of Parliament for Cork South Central and is currently the Minister for Finance in the Government of Ireland. He previously served as Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform from 2020 to 2022. Sheila Roach is the co-founder of Worthy, an award-winning social impact consultancy whose clients include the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, ONE, VOW, Women Moving Millions, and Nutrition International. She is also a brand and creative consultant for the RED organization. Please join me in welcoming our speakers to the stage.
Hi, yes, my mic is on. I'm Sheila Roach. It's lovely to be here. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you to the Chicago Council on Global Affairs for having us here today and for the amazing work they do. And thank you to all of you for being here and also for those of you joining virtually. Since it's just around the corner, I guess it's not too, it's slightly premature to wish everyone a happy St. Patrick's Day. I have to say, as an Irish person, I think no city does St. Patrick's Day more enthusiastically than Chicago. And I was just Googling online today, but I think Dublin has had to play catch up and has just recently started turning the Liffey green. But they're way behind Chicago on that one. And as an Irish import to Chicago myself, I have to say I'm really delighted to welcome Ireland's Minister for Finance, Michael McGrath, to talk to us today about the impact of the Good Friday Agreement, the anniversary of which is just around the corner on April 10th, I think was the signature date, and to talk to us about that, its groundbreaking impact on peace in Northern Ireland. So, Minister, welcome to Chicago.
Thank you very much, Sheila.
It's lovely to be here. Yeah, it's lovely to meet you. So, as I said, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Can you talk to us a little bit about your perspective on its impact on peace in Northern Ireland?
Well, its impact has been extraordinary. It has been transformative, really, in terms of relationships within Northern Ireland and on the island. And fundamentally, it has delivered peace. And that is what it was designed to do. It is a complex agreement, but it has stood the test of time. It's not perfect, and people will have different views about changes they would like to see brought about, but it has provided the architecture and the framework for giving expression to a very complex set of relations on the island of Ireland. And of course, the three strands, the institutions within Northern Ireland, which we really want to see get back up and running again as soon as possible, the whole north-south dynamic and how we manage that going forward, and of course the east-west. And so it is a complex construct, but I think the genius of the Good Friday Agreement is that it found a way of navigating very difficult territory where strongly held views can continue to be held, and a pathway is laid out for those who want to preserve the Union and equally for those who aspire to have a united Ireland.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. The US and Ireland has such a deep history, and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the US role in bringing about the agreement and also the importance of its kind of ongoing interest in Northern Irish peace.
It's been absolutely vital. I don't believe that we would have secured the Good Friday Agreement without the support of the United States. And, you know, it has been done in a non-partisan way. Both Democrats and Republicans down through the decades have provided impartial support with a view to bringing about peace on the island of Ireland, and successive presidents played a leading role. Of course, during the negotiations themselves, there were crucial interventions by President Clinton at different points where he had to lean on individual parties to just go that extra mile for peace and to take the risk for peace. And I think, of course, of Senator George Mitchell, who chaired those talks, and the contribution he made was just immense. The sacrifice he made personally to spend so much time in Northern Ireland in an effort to try and broker an agreement that many people thought was beyond reach, that it was impossible. And members of Congress have consistently provided support. So we go all the way back to Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, successive presidents who all made an important contribution, and also who ensured that the economic dimension and the importance of an all-island economy, the benefits to Northern Ireland of peace from an economic perspective. And of course President Biden has recognised that with the appointment of Joe Kennedy as a special envoy on economic affairs to Northern Ireland. So that commitment, which has been sustained and consistent, has been absolutely crucial as a backstop and in essence as a guardian of the agreement.
Yeah, I also think that just personally, I grew up in Ireland and I'm an import myself to Chicago. I've lived here for 18 years. It was just my impression watching that whole process was that you saw political leadership really put its reputation in some ways and very deep currency on the line, which I felt was kind of unusual.
People took huge risks for peace, and you know, when I think about my own upbringing, my formative years as a teenager, when I was beginning to take an interest in current affairs, in the history of our island, watching the news, and you know, the atrocities that took place, I can still, you know, ream them off. Greysteel and Shankill Road, Enniskillen, Warren Point, where two little boys in England died, Tim Parry and Jonathan Ball, and to see the extraordinary courage of people like the parents of Tim Parry, Colin and Wendy, who set up their own Peace Foundation and who invested in the face of such devastation and personal tragedy, invested their own time to try to build peace and reconciliation. And if that kind of a contribution doesn't inspire political leaders to go that extra mile for peace, then I'm not sure what would. And you know, I'm delighted that we are at a point in Ireland now where we have peace. There will be occasional issues, and there was a shooting of a PSNI off-duty officer just a short few weeks ago. He survived. He's fighting for his life, but it's a stark reminder of the past that we have pretty much left behind, and you have to continue to invest in peace. It's like any relationship, you know, you have to continue to give it time, to give it the resources, to keep talking to each other. And in the course of my work as Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, I made a number of visits to Northern Ireland because I had responsibility for the peace programme, and again that we have had successive peace programmes which have been funded by the European Union, the British government, the Irish government, very strong support from the United States, and reaching out to different community organisations. I was struck by what some of the women there would have said to me, that for the first time ever, and these were grown adults, they would have spoken to someone from the other community and discovered, of course, that they had far more in common than they had that divided them. But the simple process of just getting people to talk, getting people to sit down, have a discussion, is a great way, I think, to disarm conflict.
Yeah, it's really amazing, actually, which is, you know, I'm going to jump to a little further to another question that, I mean, when I was growing up there as well, I also kind of experienced that kind of daily drip feed of news about violence and atrocities. And so it was almost impossible to imagine peace happening there. You know, do you have thoughts about the example of this process and what was brought around, and its possible application to, other conflicts around the globe?
Yeah, I do. I think some of the ingredients that are essential include, international support. And we spoke about the United States. I spent the last couple of days in Toronto, and actually last night at an event met General John de Chastelain, who played such an important role as chair of the Independent Commission on Decommissioning, which, after the agreement was such an important part of trying to build confidence. And but right across the board, throughout Europe, the support from our European partners was absolutely steadfast. So I mentioned already the peace programme, which has been consistent for a number of decades now, between 20 and 30 years. There has been funding to support reconciliation and peace building. So definitely the whole dimension of international support is important in resolving any conflict, because it also helps to bring a fresh perspective and an outside pair of eyes to issues. Also, I think democratic legitimacy to any agreement. So when an agreement was reached on Good Friday in 1998, it was put to the people in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland by means of a public vote, and it was overwhelmingly endorsed. And I think that answered unequivocally, for once and for all, those that wanted to take up arms again or get involved in armed conflict, that there was absolutely no public support. There was no democratic legitimacy for the continuation of the armed struggle. And I think that was really important and powerful, and it sent a message to the political representatives of all of those who previously were involved in the conflict, that it was over.
Yeah, I think there was a 71% majority vote for it in Northern
in the north
Ireland.
It was much higher, even in the Republic.
Yeah,
I
it was
think
extraordinary
it was 90
time.
plus percent.
Yeah. What role do you think the Ireland and the UK's membership of the EU played in the process?
It played a very important part in a number of different ways, because common membership of the European Union, which sadly is no longer something we share because the UK have left, it brought people together. So it brought members of the European Parliament from Ireland and from the United Kingdom together a few days every week. You think about people like John Hume and so many others who spent time in the European Parliament, and of course it brought ministers together at least every month. So I sit on the group of European finance ministers, and up until a few years ago the Chancellor of the Exchequer would be there every month, and you get to know somebody very well, and that was replicated across all of the different sectoral council meetings. So that was important, that people did get to know each other and relationships were strong. But the fact that both governments became co-guarantors of the agreement was absolutely fundamental to its success. Both governments, both countries had to be fully bought in, otherwise this would not work, because the Unionists wanted to see, of course, that their part of the Union was going to be absolutely protected, that there would be strong East-West cooperation. The Nationalists wanted to see the North-South dimension, the North-South Ministerial Council working. So without all of those different pillars, it simply wouldn't have worked. So good working relationship. I think leadership as well. Different prime ministers and Taoiseach, whether it be John Major or Albert Reynolds, of course Brian Cowen, Bertie Ahern, Tony Blair, again across different parties, John Bruton, so many people went that extra yard to try and secure a deal, and there were good relationships there. You look back to the Downing Street Declaration, which of course predated but was an important step along the road to the Good Friday Agreement. We had a ceasefire in 1994, and unfortunately it ended with the bombing of Canary Wharf in 1996, and we had a resumption of conflict. So there were stops and starts. It's never going to be easy to bring about an end to a conflict that lasted for 30 years and that had seeds that were sown long before then, but a conflict that directly cost the lives of about 3,500 people.
I know, dreadful. Just talking about the EU membership, I have to admit, maybe I'm just the kind of dum-dum in the room here, but the whole Brexit thing and the border between Northern and Southern Ireland has totally confused me over time. And so I thought it might be, I don't want to dumb down the event here, but I just wanted to kind of remind everyone that as a result of Brexit, the UK and EU have been trying to solve the problem of a porous border and the movement of goods between Northern and Southern Ireland. I guess that's the easiest way of putting it. But Minister, so the Windsor framework has been in the news recently, and I'd love to talk to you about, can you tell us about it, Ireland's position on it? And if it's relevant, how it differs from the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was negotiated by the previous UK government.
Sure. Well, we warmly welcome it. It's the first thing I want to say, and it's taken a long time to get to this point. Bear in mind the Brexit vote in the UK was in 2016. And here we are in 2023 still negotiating the fallout from it and the consequences of it. And the position of Northern Ireland in the context of Brexit is particularly complex because, of course, constitutionally it's part of the United Kingdom, part of the internal UK market. The UK has now left the European Union, has left the single market. We have an open border on the island of Ireland. The Republic is a committed member of the European Union, absolutely committed to the operation of the single market. And so in a situation where the UK have left and you have an open border on the island of Ireland, how do you square the need for Northern Ireland to remain an important part of the UK market while at the same time recognising that we could not return to any form of hard border infrastructure on the island of Ireland, while also fully protecting and preserving Ireland's place in the single market, and at the same time ensure that the Good Friday Agreement in all its tenets was completely upheld. So it's been going on for a number of years, and the Northern Ireland Protocol was negotiated and agreed as part of the withdrawal agreement, but there was significant opposition to it. It did raise challenges, undoubtedly, for traders in Northern Ireland to continue to receive goods in from Great Britain, and indeed there were difficulties with certain lines of products that they weren't able to get in because EU standards had to be applied. So in essence now an agreement has been reached whereby there will be separate lanes. There will be a green lane for goods that are coming into Northern Ireland from Great Britain that are staying in Northern Ireland. No checks whatsoever will be needed in respect of those because they're just staying within the UK internal market. And then goods that are coming in to Northern Ireland from Great Britain for onward transmission to the Republic coming in a separate lane, and there will be customs checks and formalities have to be adhered to in respect of those because they're entering the EU single market. So from the very beginning we had incredible solidarity from the other EU member states, and there was always the concern as to Ireland's position in the single market. Could there be a question mark of some kind placed over that because we now had an open border with a country that was now a third country that was outside of the European Union. So it's great news that there is an agreement. It was negotiated by the European Union and the United Kingdom government. Ireland, as part of the EU, very much supported the EU negotiating stance, but both of those parties were in charge of the negotiations. We do hope now it will unlock the restoration of the Executive in Northern Ireland and the Assembly. It hasn't sat since the elections in May of last year, and in recent years prior to that, there was a 3-year period at one point when the institutions in the North were not up and running. So when we talk about the importance of the Good Friday Agreement, an integral part of that agreement is the proper functioning of the democratic institutions in Northern Ireland. They're currently not functioning and we need to get them back up and running. So the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, have welcomed some elements of the Windsor Agreement, raised concerns about some other aspects. They said they will take some time, they haven't said how long, to consider the agreement, and they're getting constitutional legal advice on different aspects of it, and they hold the key to the restoration of the institutions. Because of the construct of the Good Friday Agreement, you need nationalists and unionists to jointly form a devolved government, and so that's where it stands right now.
Is that a reference to the Stormont Break, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yes, so the Stormont Break is a new instrument provided for in the Windsor Agreement, and the DUP have already raised certain questions about how exactly that will operate. Of course, an important consideration for them and the UK government has been what is the role of the European Court of Justice in relation to being the final arbiter of disputes. The European Union view, as you would expect, will be that when it comes to matters of EU law and it comes to the operation of the single market, the European Court of Justice is the final arbiter. And so a way had to be found of ensuring that the democratic voices in Northern Ireland had an input into how complaints and disputes arising from the operation of the protocol as reformed now would work out. And so in essence that's what you're referring to there.
It sounds like a Gordian knot, but the Windsor framework sounds really like incredible progress.
It is huge progress, and we have had a stalemate now for quite some time, and from Northern Ireland's point of view, this presents an amazing opportunity. They have full and unhindered access, of course, within the UK single market, but also unhindered access to the EU single market of 450 million people. So they're in a unique place in terms of the whole European landscape, and we're already seeing very significant trade benefits for Northern Ireland. Cross-border trade has increased significantly, and it will now be an attractive place for investment, and that's why the appointment of Joe Kennedy is a very important contribution by President Biden's administration.
Okay, great. So thank you. You've really, I think, clarified a lot, certainly for me, and I hope everybody else here. We just celebrated International Women's Day, which I think actually should happen every day. But women played a really big role in bringing about the peace process.
For sure.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and there was a women's coalition who took part in the talks and who always brought pragmatism and a fresh perspective and some common sense, and who really just underlined the imperative of never going back to violence, and they just would not accept not reaching agreement as an option. And they were so refreshing when they spoke to camera during those talks. The politicians, typically male, had to defend their own interests and set out their stall on behalf of their party and the people they represent. But the women who were part of it were a coalition that was cross-community. And so they brought a unique perspective to all of those discussions. But right through the whole peace-building process, we have had women who have shown extraordinary courage and taken huge risks to help challenge people and to build peace.
Amazing. And then my last question is about, just back to Brexit for a second, since Brexit happened, and it's hard to believe that's been 7 years ago.
I know.
It doesn't seem that long, but it is. There's been a lot more talk about the possibility of a united Ireland. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the Good Friday Agreement is the answer, because it sets out the template, and so the essence of it is that it falls to the Northern Secretary of State at a time of his or her choosing, when he or she believes that the conditions are right, to call a border poll. And so United Ireland can only happen when a majority of the people in Northern Ireland, and separately a majority of the people in the Republic of Ireland, so vote. But the calling of the vote is a matter for the Northern Secretary. Of course, Northern Ireland has changed so much in the last 25 years. It's become much more cosmopolitan, more diverse, and for 90 plus years of its existence, we had a majority unionist population and a minority nationalist population. We now actually have three minorities: unionists, nationalists, and people who are non-aligned. And we've seen the growth of the Alliance Party in Northern Ireland, for example, who made a major breakthrough at the last election. So in many respects, those of us who aspire to a united Ireland, as I do and my party does, we have to win the argument, and we have to invest in relationships. We have to go to these communities, talk to people, engage with them, and seek to persuade, obviously by democratic means, and helping to address the issues in those communities. One of the initiatives that we have undertaken in the current government is the Shared Island Initiative, which is, it's non-party political. It is an effort to ensure that we share this island peacefully, that we exploit all of the advantages and synergies of working together, whether it be in healthcare, in all-island research, in education, of course the economic dimension, and we are contributing money to the building of infrastructure that has benefits north and south. So that's a very practical and tangible, I think, manifestation of working towards a shared island, and ultimately it will be a democratic decision of the people at some point in the future as to the constitutional position, and there will have to be, considerable thought go into, what that process looks like, what the build up to it is like, and a lot of discussions need to take place and a lot of planning, but a lot of bridge building and discussions and reconciliation. I think all of that comes first.
So actually, final question. So at age 25, do you think the Good Friday Agreement is still fit for purpose given the increased diversity of
Well, it has stood the test of time, and there are different arguments about reforms and changes that could be brought about, but when you consider how difficult it was to agree it, trying to reach a consensus on changing individual aspects of it will be really difficult, and I think the priority now is to give it full effect, is to implement the Good Friday Agreement, and at the moment it is not being fully implemented because we don't have the democratic institutions up and running. So as a minister in the Irish government, I should have an opportunity to sit alongside the ministers in Northern Ireland at the North-South Ministerial Council, and we should be meeting regularly, and we're not meeting regularly because that's one of the institutions that is not currently operating. And so it is the operation of the agreement rather than the agreement itself, I believe, that is imperfect and incomplete, and our focus should be on ensuring that we give full effect to the terms of the agreement, and primarily that we get the institutions up and running. I think when people go to vote, they have a reasonable expectation when they elect politicians that the politicians will go to their place of work, Parliament, and legislate and deal with problems, and there are problems in Northern Ireland that need to be dealt with, and I think that's where our focus and our priority needs to be in the short term.
Okay, great, thank you so much. I think we are going to open this up for Q&A in the room, so if anyone would like to ask a question, the microphone is in the aisle between the two rows of seats, and so I welcome anyone to ask any questions.
I'll jump up here for one. You were talking about how Brexit has changed a number of initiatives and dynamics within the EU and UK. Would you say that in terms of creating a united Ireland, the fact that the UK is out of the EU gives a little bit more support for united Ireland? Are some of your EU partners interested in investing? Is that a good investment going forward for the EU?
So it has certainly led to a public debate, and of course the majority of people in Northern Ireland didn't support Brexit and wanted to retain the UK's membership of the European Union, but it is a reality. It has happened and we have to deal with the consequences of it, and we have seen how long that has taken through tortuous negotiations over that period of time. So I think it has certainly led to more civic discussion on the future of the island and what does the future of the island look like. From a European perspective, they absolutely respect the agreement that is there. The European Union was a huge supporter of the agreement and played a very important role in securing that agreement, and they will only seek to be helpful. They won't take one side of the argument or the other. They are a friendly partner with the United Kingdom. They respect the constitutional position of Northern Ireland, and they respect the complexity of the framework that is provided for in the Good Friday Agreement. And I think it is first and foremost a matter for all of us on the island of Ireland to work that agreement to the maximum extent.
Super.
Yes, following up on your observations about the potential unification of the North and the South, you have indicated that, and the agreement itself reflects this, that there must be the approval of the majority of the people in both the North and the South before that happens. You've also indicated that as an essential condition precedent that the Secretary of State, I guess that's the official, of Northern Ireland must initiate the process. And my question is, are there any criteria, legal criteria that guide his judgment that if they're in place and he doesn't act, some action in the form, say, of a mandamus action, an action to compel him to act, can take place?
Well, under the agreement, the assessment does fall to the Northern Secretary to come to a view as to whether or not there is a realistic basis that a poll might be successful and that there would actually be a majority of people in favour of Irish unity. So that is an assessment that will have to be done. I think the truth is that it is the middle ground. I've referred to the three minorities in Northern Ireland now, and while it's not necessarily the case that every nationalist will vote for unity, though you'd expect the overwhelming majority would. It will be that middle ground who are non-aligned, young people who are increasingly not inheriting their political beliefs or views, but are making up their own mind, who will decide where their where their future best lies.
Okay, great.
Reasonable basis, that leaves a lot of room for discretion. Is that the only criteria that guides the Northern Secretary, the Northern Ireland Secretary of State? That in his judgment, in his sole discretion, there's a reasonable basis either to proceed or not to proceed?
That's the case, yeah.
Gives him lots of flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? We do have, good, somebody's getting up.
One more question. So the Windsor framework, if it isn't accepted, is there, and Stormont isn't restored, is there the potential, well not potential, but like how do you see things moving forward with that? Is that worth revisiting the Good Friday Agreement so that the other, or the alliance kind of, basically the middle ground are represented? Because at the minute it's been like held hostage by the two extremes.
Yeah, that's one of the main issues that has been raised in public debate, is that need for cross-community support, essentially for the executive and the assembly to function. But I think it should be said that there is very broad support for the Windsor Agreement in Northern Ireland. The business community has overwhelmingly come out in support of it, as has every other political party. So that's really positive, and I think the focus really is on trying to get that agreement over the line, get the institutions up and running. If that does not become possible, we will inevitably see at some point further elections in Northern Ireland, and I think the people then will have their say as to the positions taken by individual parties on the restoration of the institutions.
Right, thank you so much, Minister. I think we have one, oh my goodness, I've done something weird with the iPad. Yeah, we have one question from online. What would you like to see more from the US government to further bolster US-Ireland relations?
Just continued engagement. We can't really ask for more. I mean, the United States has been an outstanding partner and supporter of the peace process long before peace was even imaginable in Northern Ireland, and that bipartisan support has been indispensable, and really I just want to, on behalf of the Irish Government, thank everyone in the United States who has played a role in providing that invaluable support, and I know that will continue in the period ahead. The United States is in many respects the third guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement, and has invested so much in it, and I think it is a real foreign policy success for the United States as well, and I think can be held up as a template of how the influence of the United States can be brought to bear in resolving a conflict in a very positive way, and for that we will be forever grateful. I mean, we obviously have such a deep and special relationship between our two countries, and I know that the conflict in Northern Ireland and bringing about a resolution to it is an issue that has been close to the hearts of Irish Americans for many years, but you can all be really proud of the role that you have played in securing peace in Northern Ireland. What we have is not perfect, but we do have peace, and now it's about ensuring that the democratic institutions are fully up and running and focused on the bread and butter issues that people are really interested in, healthcare and housing and cost of living and climate change. So we need the institutions to be up and running, and that is what will give proper expression to the Good Friday Agreement, but the support of the USA has been incredible.
Yeah, well put. Thank you so much for your time and your perspective today. We know you're super busy, and feel very grateful to talk to you. And thank you everybody for being here today, and thanks for those of you tuning in from elsewhere, and thanks again to the Chicago Council.
Thank you all.